Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all to the course Management, Organizational Policies and Practices. Today we'll be having 15th lecture of the course. So before starting off with the today's lecture, I would like to give you a recap of 14th lecture, which was on control. So here in that lecture, we started off with our discussion with what control is. We discussed the whole process of control by starting from setting the standards, how the standards are set in the organizations, what are the different criteria to set the standards in the organization. We had a discussion on that, how benchmarking is done, what is the importance of benchmarking, and what is the importance of customer satisfaction or the response to the customer, how we need to take care of that while setting our standards, and how our standards need to be aligned with the goals that are being set in the organization. Then we had a discussion on the comparison to standards, that the standards that we set, we actually measure our performance or our outcomes in relation to those standards, and then we take the corrective actions. We see that if there are any deficiencies or if there are any deviations in the set standards or in the actual standards that in the actual performance or actual outcomes, then we need to take some corrective actions for those, right? Or we need to put up some controls, or we need to tighten our controls, or in certain cases we also may need to lose our controls. Then we need to see we saw that how the control is a dynamic process. It's not a one-time activity, or it's not a one-time exercise, but it's a continuous process, and the companies need to exercise control and evaluate their programs and their policies and strategies, etc. For their effectiveness, they need to exercise this evaluation and control on a continuous ongoing basis, right? So then we had a discussion on what the company has to control or what to control, and we also discussed that is it necessary to control or not, and how necessary it is to control, right? So therein we discussed two factors. One was the resource dependence, and the other one was the resource flow. And we saw that how if the nature of the resource is critical for the business of the organization, then that organization is highly dependent on that particular resource for its business or for its profitability, and in that case it's really important to control that resource. So the higher the degree of dependence on a resource, the more control is necessary, and the same goes for the resource flow. If for the flow of your resource that you are critically dependent on, you need to have higher controls as well, right? How you have to control the flow of the resource that is important for you or your company, right? So we had a discussion on these two aspects of the necessity of control. Then we had a discussion on whether the control is possible or not, and herein we discussed that sometimes there are certain costs of control that make it really difficult for the firms to exercise control, such as that there are different regulation costs that we discussed that can make the control very costly, and in certain cases the costs, they exceed the benefits of control. Herein I give you the example of the Delta Airlines, that how in that airlines in an attempt to reduce their costs, they actually ended up in their poor ratings compared to the other domestic airlines on the timely arrivals, right? So I give you a detailed example to elaborate on why control might be difficult in certain cases, or of course control is possible but it might be costly. So then in that cases it may not be very feasible for the company to exercise control when the costs are greater than the benefits of the control. Then we had a discussion on the cybernetic feasibility, that all the different steps in the control process, if one of the steps is missing, then there is not feasibility to exercise the control, right? So I gave you the example that if in some cases the output that has to be measured in the company, or the nature of the job is such that the output is not very objective, it is very subjective, or it's difficult to measure the output, right, then the control may also be difficult in that kind of cases, right. Then we had a discussion on the quasi control. So we saw that quasi control, the companies can use quasi control when control is difficult, or when control is not much possible, right. Then in those cases the companies can use this quasi control option by either reducing the dependence on the resource that is critical for the companies, right, and wherein I gave you the example of PepsiCo, that how it took out its investments, its resources from one of its businesses, which was the restaurant business, how it took out money from that business and how it invested that business in other businesses, other key core businesses, and mainly on Pepsi, to fight the competition with Coca-Cola. So what it did was that it reduced its dependence on one of the resource to enhance its control, overall control, right. And the other one is the restructuring of the dependence. So we saw that how you can restructure the companies. They can, instead of reducing the dependence on a particular resource, which means that you are changing your strategic goals, you're changing your strategic options, strategic targets, just as happened in the case of Pepsi, because it changed its strategic strategy, comparative strategy, or its strategic goal. It changed it, right. And in the case of restructuring dependence, what I told you, that what we do is that we don't change our goals, we don't change our corporate strategies, but we are only just switching. We're switching to the substitutes, right, of the resources, right. So I here gave you the example of the planes. What they do is that switching off from commercial to the private plane business, right, wherein they see that there are more avenues in the private plane business. So they are just substituting commercial for private planes, right. And we saw that how it is a more resource flow, the more control over resource flow is possible when you are restructuring your dependence, and you may not need to change your goals when you are restructuring your dependence, right. So they are the different quasi control options. Then we had a discussion on the what are the different methods that the organizations or the managers they can use for exercising this control activity in the organizations. And we saw that the first one that we discussed was the bureaucratic style of control, wherein the more emphasis on the rules and policies of the organization, and those policies and rules, they set the guidelines for controlling the actions, behaviors, and outcomes of the individual. So they need to follow those guidelines, the strict guidelines. They're being stipulated, their top-down management, right, and inflexible and standardized procedures and policies that the employees they are supposed to follow in the organizations under the bureaucratic structures. So it is inherently bureaucratic structure which is very once established. It's very difficult to break, as Max Weber, who is one of the great advocates and the founders of this bureaucratic style of management, he says that once these structures are established, they are really difficult to break, almost impossible for them to break, right. So the other style is the output control that we discussed, which was that you are more emphasizing on the instead of the rules and other stuff, you are emphasizing on the output, right, on the performance, or on the what is the outcome of the effort, right. You are more emphasizing on that. And the objective control, again, output control is more or less related to the objective control, wherein you are measuring the objective outcomes, right. And then we had a discussion on the normative control, wherein it's about the it's more subjective, and it's more you are trying to mold the behavior of the individuals in response to the organizational culture and the organizational values and the organizational norms, right. Not very clear rules and policies they are stipulated, but the organizational norms and the culture, they are guidelines for the individuals to behave in certain ways and dictate for them what are the do's and what are the don'ts of operating in the organization. Then we had a discussion on the concertive control. Under the concerted control, we saw that it's more like a group-based activity, wherein what's happening is that the group, in the form of the autonomous groups, all the team members or the group members, they combine and they provide guidelines, or they dictate each other's behavior. So the members, from the pressure of the co-workers or the team members, or according to the expectations of the team members, each member behaves. So they are guiding, they are setting their own rules, regulations and guidelines, and their own do's and don'ts, and they behave accordingly, right? So the team itself is the control mechanism here. Then we had a discussion on the self-control, where you're controlling your own self, right? You're accountable for your own activities, for your own goals, and for your own targets, and how you achieve them, your own strategies, everything. You're responsible for all that, and a broad boundary line is defined for you by your manager or by the organization, and within that you can play in that range, right, as per your own wants and desires, and you have to control your own deeds. So what happens is that we had a discussion on what we have to control, because previously this was the concept in the organizations that a good indicator of control is the financial control, right? So if your financials are really positive, your liquid ratios and your asset ratios and your liability ratios, your profitability ratios, debt equity ratio, etc. So all these are the different, and the return on assets, return on equity, etc. So all these ratios, they were used as a tools, or they were used as a guideline to inform the company how the company is doing, how it is performing, and they were basically the main indicators, right? And even in the managerial meetings or the meetings with the CEOs, all the managers and all the employees, they were gauged, they were judged against, and the organizational performance and the individual performance, the only criteria was these financial measures and these financial ratios. So if they were positive, that was fine, and if they are negative, the employees and the managers, they were then punished for that, because that was the only criteria against which the performance was measured, right? But then the balanced scorecard approach, it is, as its name indicates, and as we discussed in our last section, in our last lecture, that it is a more balanced approach, wherein which states that it's not only the financial perspective, but it is the other perspectives as well that are equally important to the organization, and for the survival of the organization, and for the competitiveness of the organization. So it's not only about the finances, it's also about the customers, how your customers are feeling, how your customers are doing, what is the defection rate of your customers, right? If they're moving to the other companies, so it can be a very good indicator. If your customers are switching over to the other companies, it can be a good indicator for your own company, that how it is doing in the market, right? And only that indicator of your customers' performance, or is your customer satisfaction with your product, that is going to ultimately translate into those financial outcomes. So they should not be ignored. And we discussed that how the cost of a customer turnover can be very huge for the company, right? It can be 5 times more than attracting a new customer, right? So we had a discussion that it's not only the financial perspective, but it's also the customer perspective. It is also the internal perspective. When we talk about the internal perspective, we talk about the quality of the product, the input time, the output time, right? And and we also discuss, we also talk about the from the internal perspective, from the perspective of the employees as well. So it's not only, it's also that balanced scorecard considers the satisfaction of the employees as well, whether your employees are satisfied or not, how they are performing, right? If they are satisfied with the organization, if they internalize with the objectives of the organization, right, they will be more committed to the organization, and they will perform better. So in employee perspective is also very important, then how the organization is towards its external environment, how externally responsible it is, how it is doing, what strategies, what policies, what production processes it is using to minimize the waste, how it is disposing of the waste, what is its policy on the recycling of the used material and the used products. etc. And then we also discussed that innovation and learning perspective is important here as well, right? So we had a detailed discussion on this perspective on what you have to control, not only the financial but the other aspects as well that are important to be controlled. Okay, for today's lecture we move to the personality and outcomes is the topic of today's lecture. So it's a very interesting topic here. In today, let me first give you an outline and then we start with what we can expect. So we start off with the discussion on what is personality and what are personality traits. Then we see that how we measure personality, how the personality can be measured. Then we'll be seeing the different determinants of personality. Right, there can be a number of determinants of personality such as the heredity, the environmental factors and the situational factors, and we'll be seeing that how what is their relative importance vis-a-vis the determination of the personality of the individual. Then we'll be seeing the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which was the oldest model of personality, measuring personality that was given, and then we'll be seeing the big 5 personality traits or big 5 model of personality that is also referred to. Then we'll be discussing the personality traits and the different personality traits and the outcomes of those personality traits from the individual and as well as from the organizational perspective. Then we'll be having a discussion on the core self-evaluations, wherein we'll be studying the self-esteem and locus of control, which are the parts of these core self-evaluations. We'll be having a look, other than the 2 models of personality that I told you earlier, we'll be having a discussion on a few other personality traits as well. MAC, self-monitoring, risk-taking, type A, type B personality, proactive personality, self-efficacy, political skills. These are a few of the personality traits that are really important in the organization, or that have the implications for the organization, and that is why they have also been included in today's discussion. We'll be having a discussion on person-job fit. We'll also, in relation to this, discuss the person-organization fit, and then we'll conclude our today's lecture with the implications for the managers. So, what is personality? Personality is the sum total of ways in which an individual reacts and interacts with others. Measurable traits a person exhibits, right? So, herein we see that if we say that he has a smiling face, or he has a sad face, or he has an angry face, or if we say that he's shy, all these characteristics that we talk about someone, they are not his personality. They don't form his personality. We are not referring to the personality here, but as this definition indicates, it's not about one single part of an individual, but it's a sum total, right? And when it is the aggregate, and that aggregate is greater than the sum of the parts, right? So a personality is in whole, when you're seeing somebody in whole, right? So it is in aggregation, it's not in individual parts, right? Like a smiling or a sad face. The personality traits, they are basically enduring characteristics that describe an individual's behavior. So personality traits are those characteristics that define an individual's behavior. For example, if we say that he's confident, or she's underconfident, he's shy. So these are the characteristics of the individual that are described as the personality traits. And it is also important to see that the traits are basically those characteristics of the individual that are inherently stable, right? Traits are those characters. They are the orientations of the individuals, and they are more coming in ways that they tend to be majorly stable, right? It's difficult for them to change over time. So traits are those personality characteristics. It is important for us to understand. Then measuring personality, how we can measure the personality of the individual. You know that one of the reasons why we are studying personality here, as you all would have noticed, that increasingly in the interviews, even in the job interviews, increasingly, and especially if you go to some you have gone through the hiring procedure of some multinationals or some very big companies, they have very extensive personality tests, right? And all the different companies, they have adapted the personality tests according to their requirements, right? So that is because different companies, they have the different job requirements, and they are trying to adjust their tests, their personality tests, according to the indicators that are more important for them, and or that are more related to their job specifications or job requirements, right? So and also, of course, for the different types of jobs, there can be different kinds of tests as well, right? So we'll be discussing this when we come to the person job and the person organization fit. But here we see that it is really important to understand that why personality is important, why measuring personality is important, why personality traits are important, what is the role that they play in the organizational life, how the different personalities can play different roles in the organizational life. So two individuals, if I give you an opening example, that if there are two individuals who are working in the same job, under same work conditions, under the same circumstances, so everything the same, right? Everything is constant, everything is the same for those two individuals. They are earning the same, they have same rewards, they have same intrinsic motivations, they have same extrinsic motivations, right? But still, one individual might be dissatisfied with his job and the other individual might be satisfied with his job. Also considering that they have the same education level, they have the same age brackets, they have the same marital statuses, they have the same occupational status, etc. Right? So one individual might be more satisfied than the other individual, or the other might be more dissatisfied. Why is that? That is because of their own personality traits. Right? They differ in their personality traits, right? So one is inherently more dissatisfied than the other individual, right? So similarly, there can be a number of traits on which two individuals under the same circumstances, they can act differently, they can behave differently, right? So when they show different attitudes under the similar circumstances, the two individuals, when they show different attitudes, right, it means that it has implications for the managers, right? So the individual who is showing more positive attitude, or whose attitude is more in line with what the organization demands, that individual would be more attractive for the organization, and the other individual, he won't be that attractive for the organization, right? And that individual may not ultimately perform up to the standards, or up to the marks, or up to the requirement of the organization, and ultimately thus result in as a costly employee for the organization and a bad hiring decision by the organization. Therefore, a careful evaluation and the careful and comprehensive testing of the individual's personality at the time of interviews has been increasingly recognized. Or at the time, there are different personality tests that have been taken from the individual, which address a number of areas to see, and they give a number of explanations, a number of situations, in order to see that how the individual, in order to understand what his personality is like and how he will behave under different situations, right? So there are two ways to measure personality. One is this by way of self-reports, wherein the individuals, as I told you, they are given the tests, for example, and they are asked to rate themselves on the different items or the different questions in the test, right? And then what happens is that this self-reporting is most commonly used way of measuring the personality, but there are a few downsides of these self-reports. They are prone to certain biases, right? So self-report bias is the first one, of course. When the individual is himself asked to rate himself, he will definitely rate himself more positively, or he'll tend to rate himself more positively. So for example, if you are trying to see that how dutiful the individual is, and you're asking the individual that how dutiful you are, or how would you behave in this kind of situation, then of course it is expected that he will be saying on a Likert scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is the highest degree of being dutiful, he might rank himself at 4 or 5. Right, and especially, and this is especially going to be the case in when the individual is being tested for a vacancy or against a job, or when he has applied for a job, he will really try to overrate himself for good impression management, for portraying his positive image. And the second downside of these self-reports is that they basically they are not prone to be very accurate, right? Because sometimes it also depends upon the mood of the candidate. If he's in a bad mood, then he may not be giving that accurate answers, right? The answers may be flawed, right? And they may be over or underrated, depending upon the mood of the candidate. So the observer ratings are basically done wherein the questionnaire or the test is being taken, or the individual's co-workers or his supervisors or his peers, they are asked to fulfill the reports on the personality of the individual, right? And so these observer ratings, they don't have these kinds of downsides, such as, of course, they don't have this impression management, and they tend to be more accurate as well. Results of the self-reports and the observer ratings, they are strongly correlated. That has been shown in the research, that overall there is strong correlation between these two, but still the observer ratings, they are preferable over the self-reports, especially in certain other situations, such as when you have to measure the performance of the individual or on how he is performing at the job. Self-reports tend to be very much faulty, right? They tend to be faulty, they tend to be overrated or overestimated, right? So the observer ratings, the ratings by the supervisor of the employee, they are more strongly recommended in measurement of certain constructs especially. So also it is important to see that if you are trying to examine something, if you can make your methodology such that you can take both the self-reports and the observer ratings, that is going to be a stronger research design, right? Wherein you can get unique information from both the ratings, right? And then that can help you in arriving at better conclusions, more informed conclusions. So what are the different determinants of personality? The first one is the heredity, right? Heredity, of course, that is, as I told you in the outline, that there are environmental determinants as well, and there are the situational determinants as well of personality. But the heredity determinants, they are, the research indicates that they are the strongest determinants of personality. So they are the factors, heredity are the factors that are determined at the conception, such as the physical stature, the facial attractiveness, gender, temperament, muscle composition, reflexes, energy level, strongly determined by who your parents are, right? So the research findings, there are some very interesting studies and the thousands of the studies that were carried out on the twins in all over the world. Many researchers have done this exercise or they have done this research on the twins in order to understand the importance of heredity, that how important it is in determining the personality. So what the scientists did was that they studied twins who were spread in all parts of the world. One of the study I'm going to quote here, in which the twins, the two who were separated from each other, and they were living at 45 miles distance from each other. Right at the time of birth, they were separated from each other, and they lived for 39 years apart from each other, and at a distance of 40 miles from each other. Right? But when the researchers found that between those twins, there were amazing similarities. There were not a few similarities between them, but there were amazing similarities, such as they were using the same car and same color of car. They were using the cigarettes of the same brand. They were regularly vaccinated from the same place, and their dogs were named the same. Right? So these are really amazing similarities between those two twins who never lived together. So which indicates that heredity has a very major role to play in forming the personality of the individual. Right? So researchers and the scientists, they also found that it's not about they found that the parents or the environment of the individual that plays little role in determining his personality, and they found out that even the siblings who are living under one roof and who are being reared by the same parents, there won't be as much similarities between them as there are between the twins. Right? So that's really interesting, and that indicates that how strongly heredity determines the personality of the individual. But the other factors, such as the environmental and the situational, they are not as strong determinants. Then it's important to see here that personality of the individual, it does not remain totally stable over time, but it changes over time. Right? So it is not fully stable, but it is partly stable. Right? And I will, in my next slides, I will come up with a few explanations of how some of the personality traits, they are partly stable and how they can be developed over time as well. Here I have an example for you, that if an individual is more responsible at the age of 5 than his sibling, he is expected to be more responsible at the age of 20 as well than his sibling, although his sibling will become more and more responsible as he will grow. Right? But that individual will also become more and more responsible when that will grow, but still the individual who is more responsible in his childhood would still remain more responsible than his sibling, although both will become more and more responsible over time. Right? So the rank order will remain the same. Right? Rank order does not change, but you learn some of the characteristics or some of the traits, or you learn on them, or they improve. Right? So for example, if you are more smarter than your brother at the age of 10, at the age of 20 you will still remain more smarter than your brother, although both of you may become more smarter at the age of 20 than both of you were at the age of 10. Right? So the rank order will remain the same. So if one individual is more intelligent than the other in the childhood, he will still remain more intelligent at any age, even though both grow in their scores on intelligence. Okay, we have this Myers-Briggs type indicator, which is the oldest, as I told you, tool to measure the personality of the individual. So this indicator basically consists of 100 questions which are used to measure the personality of the individual. So it basically taps 4 characteristics and classifies people into one of 16 personality types, right? So it makes the combinations of these, so the different characteristics, the personality types that it has indicated is like extroverted versus introverted, sensing versus intuitive, thinking versus feeling, judging versus perceiving. And this scores a combination of all 4. For example, ENTJ, right? So you make the combinations of all these different personality types, and that indicates your personality, the score that arrives. So it has been commonly used by very international organizations such as Apple, AT&T, General Electric, and a number of hospitals and educational institutions. Let me explain to you a little bit about all the different personality types that this test has indicated. The extroverted individuals who are really outgoing, they are sociable, they are assertive, they have really social networks and they like to meet and collide with people. Then the introverts, they are the quiet and shy people, they are the opposite to the extroverts. Then there are sensing individuals or the sensing types who are more practical and they prefer routine and order. They focus more on details. Whereas intuitive are, as the name indicates, they are basically not focused on the routine, practicality, order, analysis, etc. They are more trying to focus on the unconscious processes, and they're trying to look at the big picture. Thinking types, they use reason and logic to handle problems, whereas the feeling type, they rely on their personal values and emotions. Judging types, they want control and prefer order and structure, whereas the perceiving types, they're flexible and spontaneous. So there are a number of combinations, and as an example, I have chosen you 2-3 combinations that this test explains. That if the individual scores comes in this INTJ domains, those are the individuals which are visionaries. They have original minds and they have great drive for their own ideas and purposes. They're skeptical, they're critical, determined, and often stubborn. ESTJs, on the other hand, they're organizers, they're realistic, logical, analytical, and decisive. They like to organize and run activities. So the score that we arrive at through this test, it can be a valuable tool for self-awareness and for career guidance. But it should not be used as a selection tool because it has not been related to job performance, which is an important point. There is a criticism on this tool, although it is very widely being used. But the criticism is that since it divides the individual's personality into a number of traits and makes the one trait the opposite of the other trait, just as we saw in the previous slide that the extroverts are the opposites of the introverts. So does it mean that if an individual is extrovert, he's totally extrovert and he's not at all introvert? But that is not the case. For as per this test, an individual is either extrovert or he is introvert. But an individual can be both at a time. So a little of one and a little of the other as well. So it's not that he's 100% extrovert. He can be introvert to some extent as well. And that extroversion and introversion, that can also be partly situational as well. Right? Or we in different situations, in some situations we tend to be more extroverts, and in some certain other situations we are more introverts. So that is our personal experiences as well. So there is a criticism on this theory that it divides them into poles apart, although that may not be the case. Then the Big Five personality model, it gained very huge attention from the academicians and the researchers, scientists, and the practitioners as well. So it gives the 5 personality traits, and he says that most of the personality traits, they are covered into this big model. So the extroversion, as I told you earlier, it is the same as the sociable, gregarious, and assertive behavior of the individuals. Then agreeableness is the good nature of the individual. They're being cooperative and trusting, right? So they are in agreeableness, the individuals, they are, as it indicates, that they're more friendly and they're more cooperative towards others. Conscientiousness are the individuals who are more dependable, they are more responsible, they are more persistent, they are more dutiful, they are more organized, right? And the emotional stability is the calm, self-confident, secure individuals. So they are the individuals who are emotionally stable. They tend to be remain calm under stress, right? And they are self-confident and they are secure, versus those individuals who are not emotionally stable. They remain depressed, they remain nervous, and they remain insecure under stress. And then the openness to experience. They are the individuals who are curious, they are imaginative, they are artistic, and they are sensitive. So let's have a look on how these personality traits, they are linked to the outcomes at workplace. It has been indicated that the individuals who are emotionally stable, as I told you, that they are basically, they don't take much stress and they remain calm and self-confident, so they are expected, or they are more related to higher job satisfaction and more life satisfaction, and they have the ability to deal better with the stressful situations, right? So the work stresses, they don't affect them much compared to those individuals who are high on or who are low on emotional stability. So the individuals who are more emotionally unstable, they tend to be more affected by the job stresses, by the work stresses, such as the role ambiguity, the role, if the roles are not clear, there are conflicting roles, there is work overload. The emotionally less stable individuals, they cannot take up that work overload as in as better way as the individuals who are more emotionally stable. Then we see that compared to the introverts, the extroverts, they tend to be happier in their jobs because they're more sociable, they discuss with others, they share with others, right? So they are expected to be better satisfied with their jobs, with their lives, and they are expected to be better performers at their work as well, right? Because of their expressive nature. Then the individuals who are high on openness to experience, so as I told you, that the openness to experience is the degree to which you are open to learning, open to the new environment, right? Open to innovations, etc. So these individuals, they tend to be more creative, they tend to be more flexible, more responsive to the changes in the external environment, more they have more orientation for learning, they are more autonomous, they show better training performance, and they are more adaptable to change compared to the individuals who are low on openness to experience. And the individuals who are high on agreeableness, they are better happy than the disagreeable people. So as we saw, that agreeable individuals are those who are more friendly and who are more cooperative towards others. So they again tend to lead a better and happy life compared to the disagreeable individuals. So there also, the study indicates that those individuals, people like to like them more. The agreeable individuals, they are more compliant and rule abiding, because those individuals, they are trying to keep others happy. Therefore the individuals like them more, and they are more compliant as well. They are also less likely to engage in organizational deviance, in such as in they don't tend to engage in the violent behaviors, etc. The agreeable individuals, they have some, I told you there are positives, but there are some negatives as well to the agreeable individuals. They show lower career success, especially their earnings, they are poor. Why? Because, as I told you, because of their friendly nature, because of their cooperative nature, they tend to be more understanding of others, so they are not that good negotiators for their own selves, right? They are good negotiators for others, but not for their own selves, right? As a result, they don't have that much good results on the career success, and they are unable to gain that good earnings as well, compared to the individuals who are low on agreeableness. Conscientiousness is, as I told you, it's related to being dutiful on your job and being more organized at your job and being more committed to your job. So these individuals, they basically tend to be better performers at the job, because they tend to put in greater effort at their work. They tend to be more persistent in their effort at their work. They are more disciplined, they have more drive for their work, and as a result, their performance is better. But the downside of these individuals is that these people are not that adaptable. because they are really organized and they're really structured and they're really following the guidelines and the rules and the policies, etc. Therefore, these individuals, they don't tend to be that adaptable. Okay, we see that the different major personality attributes now. Core self-evaluations are basically the degree to which the individual likes or dislikes themselves, right? So, and there are two parts of the core self-evaluations. If we see them, the first one is the self-esteem, which is the individual's liking or disliking for themselves, and as the other is the locus of control, which is the degree to which the people believe that they are masters of their own fate. So herein we have the locus of control, the individuals who are high on internal locus of control, they basically believe that they can control their external environment, or they are the masters of their own happiness, or the external environment is in their control. There are the other factors, the outside factors, their job factors or their situational factors, they have higher degree of control over them, and the externals believe the opposite. Externals believe that nothing is in their hand, it is in the hand of the outside environment, in the hand of their supervisors, in the hand of their co-workers, and they are the master, or they are the in charge of their happiness, and they are the in charge of their well-being, etc. Right? So core self-evaluations is how you evaluate that how capable you are of performing, how much you like yourself, how much confidence you have in yourself, how much you believe that you have the mastery over your own self and over the external environment, and what is the role of the external factors in determining your happiness or other things, right? So if we go back to the previous slide, we see that these people are really confident. Who have positive core self-evaluations, they're really confident, they're really positive about themselves, they like themselves, compared to the individuals who have negative core self-evaluations. A study shows that a study of the Fortune 500 CEOs that showed that these people who have positive core self-evaluations, they tend to be overconfident and they tend to make bad decisions, right? So that is interesting. Then we move to the next personality trait, which is the MAX, also called as MAC, that is the degree to which an individual is pragmatic, maintains emotional distance, and believes that ends can justify means. So these individuals basically they try to manipulate the situations, they try to persuade others under different situations according to what they want or mean, right? And they are not persuaded by others generally, right? So but these personality traits or these characteristics of these high max indicate that there are, under certain situations, these individuals can perform better over the low max, right? So when they have the opportunity to for face-to-face interaction with the with others compared to the indirect interaction, right? So because when they have face-to-face interaction, then they are in a better position to manipulate, and they are in a better position to persuade others compared to when it is done indirectly. And similarly, when the situation or the job task or the environment is such that the rules and the procedures and the guidelines are not very strict and they are minimal, right? And then they can exercise their own latitude of manipulation, right? So they can manipulate more under the situations wherein the rules, policies are not that tight and the controls are not that tight, or they are lesser. There are fewer controls, right? In those situations, these individuals can manipulate more, they can persuade more, and thus they can get more benefits compared to the low max, and they can perform better compared to the low max. So here we see the role of the situational factors as well. So there is personality, but this kind of personality can perform better under certain situations. So the situation is the moderating factor here. Then we see another personality trait, which is the narcissism. These individuals, they have high sense of self-importance. They are basically the individuals who are really selfish, they are really arrogant, they only think of themselves, they only think themselves to be capable at their jobs, and they consider others as inferior to them, right? They tend to be more exploitative, and they have this belief that others are also working for their own benefit, right? So they have excessive admiration, self-admiration for themselves. Research reports that these individuals, they don't tend to be very effective leaders. They tend to be very bad leaders, right, because of these traits that they have. And you can expect that a leader, a good leader or an effective leader does not have this kind of traits, right? So also these individuals, they depict very low organizational citizenship behaviors, which is the helping behavior, that how much you help others at work, right, in their jobs or in other extra job activities, right? So these people depict very low organizational citizenship behaviors because of their selfish nature. Self-monitoring is basically when the individual tends to adjust to the external situations. They tend to adjust their behavior to external situations. So the individuals who are high on self-monitoring, they hide basically their true dispositions according to the situations. So they mold their behaviors according to the requirements of the situations, and that is what makes them successful, and that is what makes them better performers at job compared to the individuals who are low on self-monitoring. Individuals who are low on self-monitoring, they don't have this capability to adapt themselves or to act in ways that are required in different situations. So they remain the same in every situation, right? Compared to the high self-monitoring individuals who behave entirely differently in different situations. And as a result, these individuals, they tend to get better performance ratings. They have better, they are successful in attaining better relationships with their supervisors, and they try to they get better performance ratings, and they have more chances of promotions, both internally and the cross organizational, and they have better mobility in their careers. And these individuals also tend to occupy central positions because of their adaptable and flexible behaviors. Then we have this risk-taking individuals. As we all know that certain individuals, they're more, or certain managers, they are more prone to take risks compared to certain managers who are less risk-taking, right? And the risk-taking managers, their characteristics are such that they make quicker decisions, and they take those decisions from lesser amount of information that they have. So they are quick decision makers with less amount of information that they have, compared to the low risk taking managers. The low risk taking managers, or the managers who have low propensity to take risk, they basically try to get as much information as possible before they make their decisions, right? So they make slower decisions, and they gather huge amount of information before making their decisions. So they are the big differences between these two types of personalities. The risk-taking individuals, or the high risk-taking individuals, they, or the managers, they tend to more be in the organizations that are that are smaller and entrepreneurial. So here we can say that it is also a part of your personality, the risk-taking, but it is also, it might be driven by the environment and the situation. So those managers who are in the in those sectors which are really entrepreneurial, and where there is a lot of activity, where there is a lot of turbulence, and where the situation demands, where the nature of business is very innovative, there you need to take risks, right? You need to try new products, you need to come up with new ideas, you need to take more risks, you need to make quick decisions, and therein you tend to be more risk taker, right? Compared to the situations where the environments are really stable, right? And the procedures and rules and everything is set, and standardized policies and procedures and environments are really stable. Then there are these type A and type B personalities. So type A are personalities. They are the people who are really they are also very aggressive kind of people, right? They cannot have leisure time. They are on the move all the time. They are the people who basically want quantity. They have the emphasis over on quantity over quality, right? So they want to achieve output in numbers and figures, right? And they want to achieve it quickly, right? So that makes them really aggressive, that makes them really they're really goal oriented. Then they have the task motivation, these kind of individuals. And compared to the type B individuals, who are really opposite to the type A individuals, right? They're more fun loving, they're more relaxed, right? And they don't want to display and show their achievements to others, their accomplishments to others. They are not impatient in achieving their goals and the targets, etc., compared to the type A individuals. Herein I would like to tell you that type A individuals are reported to make bad decisions compared to type B individuals because of their hasty and quick output oriented nature. Then we have these proactive personalities. Proactive personalities, basically these are those individuals who are really trying to fix the problems even before they arise. So they are proactive in nature, they are initiative taking in nature. Mainly they take initiatives, they don't wait for the situations to change. They try to overcome the situational constraints or the environmental constraints, compared to the reactive individuals who are reacting in response to the problems when they have occurred. So the proactive individuals, they take initiatives and try the problems not to occur, try to fix them even before they occur. And the reactive individuals are those who are basically reacting to what has happened, or they are reacting to the environmental constraints or the situations. But the proactive individuals, they are trying to change their environments, change those constraints, overcome those constraints by exploring opportunities and exploring different obstacles and seeing ways on how they can overcome those obstacles. So these proactive individuals, they are reported to be more successful in their careers. They have higher organizational and commitment, and the commitment with their professions. They are reported to perform better at their jobs, and they are reported to show better advancement in their salaries and promotions compared to the individuals who are less proactive. They are reported to do better on job search, and they report better organizational citizenship behaviors, and they are reported to be more effective in teams. Then we see the self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is another personality trait which shows the individual's self-confidence to do good under different circumstances, or under different tasks, or under different situations. The individuals have this self-confidence that they can do it, right? This self-efficacy is also a partly stable personality trait. It can be developed over time. And part of it is stable, or that is hereditary, and you cannot do anything about it, but it can be learned and developed over time. There are certain trainings also provided by the organizations, by the managers, to enhance this self-efficacy of the individuals. And I discussed with you in one of my previous lectures as well that how the self-efficacy, it can be developed. So there are a number of factors that determine the self-efficacy, or through which you can develop it as well, such as the mastery orientation, that if you have done a task before, your self-efficacy to perform it will be higher. Then the vicarious modeling, wherein someone similar to you doing a task, it increases your confidence of doing it, that if someone can do it, I can also do it. Then the verbal persuasion, wherein someone convinces you that you have the necessary skills to perform the task, therefore you can do it, and it enhances your self-confidence that okay, you can do it. Then we discussed this arousal, which is the energized state to do the task. Political skills is basically the ability of the individuals to be interpersonally effective. So it is more about how effective you are in your interpersonal relationships, how astute you are in your interpersonal relationships, how you can be sociable and adjustable to the demands of the external environment, in ways that you, in your dealings, in your interpersonal relations, you are behaving with others, you are actually making those circumstances in your favor, but you are behaving with others in ways that they have this feeling, they have this signal, especially the significant others, your supervisors and your bosses, especially you are behaving in a political and effective manner in a way that they believe that you are sincere, you inspire their trust and support and effectively influence them. This capability and this skill of yours ultimately leads you to positive outcomes. You positively mold the organizational situations in your favor. The politically skilled individuals, they are reported to gain better promotions, they are reported to gain better salaries, gain better positions in the organizations, right, because of their political skills. And especially in the context of the collectivist cultures or in the developing countries where the organizations are not, their organizational human resource management systems, they're not very much formalized. There is bureaucratic systems, and where there is more reference-based systems, there is more rectapism, and the reference-based promotions. In that kind of system, the politically skilled individuals, they tend to be more successful, right? Because therein they can, these individuals, they can easily manipulate the situations, they can easily manipulate their significant others in ways that they can get more promotions and better salaries and increments, etc. So these individuals, of course, they have better social networks, they have more links, they have capabilities to get more external fundings because of their politically astute behaviors, and thus they can create more positive situations and positive environments, and they can gain positive outcomes for themselves. So here I have a few questions for you relating to these personality characteristics. So I would like you to read these slides and try to think of the answers yourself as well. So I'm not going to read them through, I'm not going to discuss them here with you, but it's the answers, they are provided on the slides as well, but please also try to solve them yourselves. Okay, so achieving job person fit. As I told you in my opening discussion of this lecture, that why the personality is important and why the fit between the personality and the job is important, right? And in relation to this personality and job fit theory that was given by Holland, he identified basically 6 personality types, and he proposed that the fit between personality type and occupational environment that determines the satisfaction and turnover. So as per this, if the personality of the individual is close to the job or the nature of job that he has, he is expected to perform better than the individual whose personality does not match his job type. So for example, a realistic person, he will be more congruent in the realistic job than a realistic person in an investigative job. So these are the, according to the different job types, that personality types that were given by Holland, such as realistic, investigative, social, conventional, enterprising, and artistic individuals. So the social people, they are trying to do better in the social jobs, and the conventional people are are expected to do better in the conventional jobs. So here is the different types of the individuals and the occupations which would be congruent to their personality types. I would urge you to go through this slide very carefully. Then we see the person organization fit. It's not only about the person job fit, but it is more about the person organization fit. So person organization fit is also equally important. Why person organization fit means that the values of the person should match the organizational culture, the overall organizational culture. So if the values of the individual, they do not match with the overall organizational culture, it would again be difficult for the individual to survive, even if the job matches his personality, and the overall culture does not match his personality, because from the organization's overall culture he is going to get the signals, right? So not only person job fit is important, but person organization fit is also important. So I have a few examples for you here, such as the extroverted individuals. They should be in team-oriented cultures, because these individuals, they are really sociable, as we discussed, so they will be more suitable in the organizations which have team-oriented cultures. Agreeable individuals who are really friendly and helpful towards others, they should be in supportive organizational cultures, and the individuals who are open to experience, they should be more in the innovative cultures, because these individuals, they tend to be very learning, and they tend to be very innovative, and they tend to be very creative. So they should be with the organizations who are very innovative organizations and who don't follow standardization, right? So who have the margin of or give the margin of autonomy and margin of coming up with new ideas and new situations and risk taking. So they should be more flourishing in that kind of environments and that kind of organizations. So imagine putting an organization who is really open to experience and who want to try new ideas and who wants to come up with new plans, new ideas, new creative ideas. If he is being put in a very bureaucratic organization, he is going to be a trouble for the organization as well, right? Because for that kind of individual, following the strict policies and guidelines and working accordingly can be very demotivating, right? So it can have consequences for them. So the management, it really needs to be very careful in dealing with the employees in right from the selection procedures. So you need to devise your selection procedures such that you only admit those employees to the organization whose values match with the values of the organization, with the culture of the organization. And then of course we have the implications. When you have selected the employees, you have the implications on how you have to deal with the different individuals, how they can respond differently in different situations, different circumstances, how they can respond differently in similar situations and similar circumstances, and how certain individuals, they can be good on certain organizational outcomes, and some can be good on certain other organizational outcomes, how some can be good leaders and how some can be effective leaders, some can be bad leaders, and so on. We discussed a number of different areas and a number of different options and a number of different personality traits. With this, we come to an end of today's lecture. I hope you had a good time hearing this lecture. See you again tomorrow. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.